A breaking development has emerged in one of the most controversial cases in recent American history. Tonight, we're examining explosive allegations surrounding Attorney General Pam Bondi and what critics are calling an illegal cover-up of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. The accusations are severe. Legal experts and Democratic lawmakers are now demanding criminal prosecution for what they describe as deliberate obstruction of justice at the highest levels of the Department of Justice. This isn't speculation or political rhetoric. This centers on a court-mandated deadline that has allegedly been violated, statutory requirements that have been ignored, and transparency laws that appear to have been openly defied. The implications extend far beyond one administration official. They potentially implicate the president himself, raising questions about what information is being concealed and why powerful figures seem willing to break the law to keep these files sealed. Recent investigative journalism has shed new light on historical connections that make the current controversy even more troubling. Major news outlets have uncovered previously unknown evidence documenting relationships and behaviors from decades past that directly contradict official narratives. As we examine this unfolding crisis, one member of Congress has drawn a clear line: there will be consequences. Prison time has been mentioned. Federal prosecution has been promised. The gloves, it appears, are coming off. Let's begin with the latest investigative reporting that's adding fuel to this fire.
There's the new explosive report I mentioned from The Times, which probes Trump's relationship with Epstein, a quote, best friend, and how they bonded over the pursuit of women. This new account draws on receipts and evidence from that era, just as Trump's birthday card for Epstein, which referenced secrets and women, was contemporaneous. It's credible evidence from at the time, which is part of why that birthday card story was a big deal. Trump's suing the Journal over that reporting, and they're pushing back and saying they expect to be vindicated in court. Well, I mentioned that evidence, which matters, because today's new article has more evidence, like handwritten notes from all the way back to 1994 kept by Epstein's assistant, which the Times corroborated. The assistant noting at the time Trump was a regular presence in Epstein's life. Another employee noting the two talked at least 3 times a week in that period of their friendship of the mid and late 90s. That's a lot of contact. It adds to the questions about Trump's contradictions and secrecy about what he knew and when he knew it with all this information coming out. Interviews and public records have reinforced how the two men socialized. Some of that, of course, was known well before this article. The assistant indicating Trump seemed to enjoy regaling Epstein with tales of his sexual exploits. Epstein seemed to delight in how uncomfortable it made his assistant to overhear them or have to hear them if that was part of the job. Another Epstein employee said, quote, Trump would occasionally send over modeling cards for Epstein to peruse like a menu, raising questions about who knew what was the intention with those so-called cards. Now, the article has accounts of Epstein arranging for underage models to come socialize with adults, mentions parties where they were illegally offered alcohol. Now, Epstein himself was not seen as a drinker, and the report in the Times does not accuse Trump of involvement in Epstein's crimes. It also notes that the women quoted in the new article did not accuse Trump of unlawful actions. And that's important to know. You have to look at all the facts, reporting, and allegations. And in a period of major allegations, some proven against Epstein, the fact that the Times talked to people who did not accuse Trump is relevant if you want the whole context of that story. That is the reporting that refers to some of the women, as well as perhaps underage women that were in Epstein's circle or recruited for it at the time. But while that's the Times article, we can also note in context, other women have accused Trump of improper conduct, including E. Jean Carroll, who won 2 civil judgments, ultimately over $80 million, upheld by an appeal.
The investigative reporting we just heard reveals a pattern that directly contradicts years of public denials. Handwritten notes from 1994. Weekly phone conversations. Modeling cards being sent between parties. These aren't rumors or partisan attacks. These are documented facts corroborated by multiple sources and supported by physical evidence. What makes this particularly relevant right now is that Attorney General Pam Bondi has complete control over what documents see the light of day. She decides what gets released. She decides what gets redacted. She decides whether court orders are followed or ignored, and that's exactly where this story takes a dramatic turn. because while historical evidence continues to surface from outside sources, photographs, witness testimony, business records, the official government files remain locked away. Files that were supposed to be released under a federally mandated deadline. Files that 3 separate federal judges have ordered must be made public. Pam Bondi's Department of Justice is now at the center of what critics are calling a brazen violation of that deadline. The Epstein Transparency Act, championed by congressional Democrats, set a clear date for full disclosure. Thousands of pages. Decades of investigation. Names, connections, and evidence that the American people have been demanding for years. That deadline. It has reportedly been missed. The response from the Trump administration. They're asking for more time. Just a couple more weeks, they say. Just a little longer to prepare the documents, they claim, but here's what has legal experts and lawmakers outraged: this deadline wasn't a surprise. This wasn't sprung on the Department of Justice overnight. They've had a month. They've had an entire administration. The files have reportedly been sitting on desks for weeks. So why the delay? What's being hidden? And more importantly, what's being altered? One Democratic congresswoman isn't accepting excuses. Her response has been unequivocal and shocking in its directness.
11:59 p.m. on Friday, the Epstein files will finally be released because of my Epstein Transparency Act. We will see thousands of documents that we should have seen decades ago. 3 federal judges have ordered the release. As I'm speaking, dozens of lawyers on the national security team at the Department of Justice are preparing the documents for release. Let me be very clear. We need a full release. Anyone who tampers with these documents or conceals documents or engages in excessive redaction will be prosecuted because of obstruction of justice. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee. We need full transparency and justice for the survivors. Tomorrow, finally, rich and powerful men who raped underage girls or who covered up for this abuse will be held accountable. The Epstein class needs to go.
That statement represents a turning point in how Democrats are approaching this administration's alleged lawbreaking. No diplomatic language. No carefully worded concerns. Just a straightforward promise: violate this court order, and you will face prosecution. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee. Those words carry weight. They signal that at least some lawmakers are done with strongly worded letters and meaningless condemnations. This is about criminal accountability. Obstruction of justice. Tampering with evidence. Concealing documents of massive public interest, and the message extends beyond Pam Bondi herself. Staffers who participate in excessive redactions. DOJ lawyers who help conceal information. Anyone who touches these documents and deliberately obscures the truth faces potential legal jeopardy. This is being framed not as political opposition, but as law enforcement. The comparison being drawn is striking. This isn't a college student procrastinating on a term paper. This is the Attorney General of the United States, allegedly committing crimes in broad daylight, seemingly confident there will be no consequences. That confidence may be misplaced. Recent developments as of December 2025 indicate growing pressure from multiple congressional committees demanding transparency, with some legal scholars arguing that document tampering or excessive redaction could trigger criminal referrals under federal obstruction statutes. The broader question this raises is about systemic accountability. For years, critics have argued that powerful individuals operate under different rules. That connections to wealth and political influence create immunity from consequences that ordinary Americans would face immediately. The Epstein case has become the ultimate test of that theory. If an attorney general can openly defy court orders, miss federally mandated deadlines, and face no repercussions, what does that say about equal justice under law? If witnesses describe potentially illegal activity but nothing happens because the files stay buried, what message does that send to victims and survivors? Some Democratic lawmakers are now arguing that the next administration, should Democrats regain power in 2028 or beyond, cannot simply move forward and heal without first ensuring accountability for alleged crimes committed during this period. The call isn't for political revenge. It's for legal consequences proportional to the alleged offenses. Pam Bondi and anyone who helped conceal these files, if the allegations prove true, should face prosecution. Not because of their party affiliation, but because they allegedly broke the law. This represents a philosophical shift. For decades, incoming administrations have tended to avoid prosecuting their predecessors, citing the need for national unity and the dangers of politicizing the justice system. The argument has always been, let's focus on the future, not relitigate the past. But what happens when the past includes ongoing cover-ups? What happens when the refusal to prosecute emboldens future lawbreaking? These are the questions being debated right now in Congress and across legal circles. Beyond Pam Bondi, there's discussion about accountability for a wider range of actors, business leaders who allegedly collaborated with policies that harmed consumers, university administrators who capitulated to political pressure, corporations that exploited crises for profit. The argument being made is that if a Democratic administration comes to power and demonstrates that bending to political pressure or breaking the law has real consequences, it changes the calculation for everyone. Not through authoritarianism, but through consistent application of existing laws. Currently, one convicted co-conspirator in the Epstein case reportedly enjoys comfortable prison conditions that bear little resemblance to typical federal incarceration, amenities that have outraged victims and their advocates who see it as yet another example of preferential treatment for the connected and powerful. The demand is clear: if you break the law, you face real consequences. No matter your last name. No matter your connections. No matter how much money you have or who you know. Pam Bondi's deadline has passed. The files remain sealed. 3 federal judges have been defied. The question now is whether the American legal system will respond, or whether this becomes another example of power protecting power. One thing is certain: Democrats are no longer willing to let these violations pass quietly into the night. The pressure will continue. The demands for accountability will grow louder, and the next several weeks will reveal whether our justice system applies equally to everyone, or whether some really are above the law. This is a story we'll be following closely as it develops. Because ultimately, it's not just about one case or one set of files. It's about whether our institutions can function as they were designed to, even when that's politically inconvenient for those in power. The stakes couldn't be higher. The American people deserve answers. Survivors deserve justice. And the law demands compliance. Whether Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice will face consequences for allegedly defying that law remains to be seen, but the message from at least some in Congress is crystal clear: if you break it, you will be held accountable. We'll continue monitoring this explosive situation as it unfolds.